Southwest 1006, turn 15 degrees to the right, vector final, descend to maintain 10,000.
Southwest 1006, 15 right, that's 275 heading and 10,000.
Roger.
Hello again guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are headed off on another outing in the Just Flight Turbo Arrow, this time with a view to taking a look at the TDS GTNXi mod for the sim. As I understand it, the TDS Garmin units have been available for Microsoft Flight Simulator for quite some time now. However, up until very recently the unit was only available as an external application from the sim, it had to be opened in a separate window. The TDS team have now, however, managed to overcome a few coding issues in the sim, and the unit can now natively be integrated into aircraft virtual cockpits. Anyway, TDS were kind enough to reach out to me and asked whether or not I would like to showcase the GTNXi on the channel. I thought that sounded like a brilliant opportunity, and hopefully it will allow you to see a little bit more of the unit in action as well. So we're going to put the TDS GTN 650 and 750 units through their paces on a fairly typical IFR flight. We're currently on the ground at a rather cold and wintry Aspen airport, and we're going to be making our way down south towards Telluride. This video will really be a bit of a flight test. We'll be looking at the unit as we go, checking out the features as and when we need them. The TDS Garmin unit provides a real-world database with accurate mapping, as well as a whole host of features including a complete North American chart database, TORS and ADS-B traffic systems, as well as, quite impressively, the unit is able to couple with the sim's autopilot, not only laterally but vertically as well, so we'll be trying a GPS approach into Telluride today to test that functionality. Currently the list of aircraft supported by the GTNXi is fairly small, but that list of course will continue to grow. Anyway, overall it's a very impressive unit from what I've seen so far. I'm certainly quite looking forward to giving it a shot into Telluride. Let's head for the cockpit of the Just Flight Turbo Arrow and we'll get ourselves ready to go. So welcome to the rather chilly cockpit of the Just Flight Turbo Arrow. It's around minus 10 degrees Celsius outside at the moment, so pretty cold. No precipitation around, so we're not too worried about airframe contamination. We may just have to dodge some cloud en route up towards Telluride. Obviously the Turbo Arrow not certified for icing conditions. Anyway, running through our initial checks, the passenger briefing is not required. Seats are adjusted and locked. Hatches and harnesses are secure. Park brake is on. Radios are off, and we've just pulled the instrument panel circuit breaker for the time being just to isolate our GTN units. Flight instruments are checked. Flight controls are full free and in the correct sense. Trims are set. Flaps, we'll just extend the flaps in stages. And the flaps are checked, they can come up again for the time being. Cabin air controls are off. Fuel, we'll come onto the left tank for the start. The tank should be evenly balanced, we fully fueled the aircraft for the flight. On the start checks, the throttle is full and free, and we'll crack that half an inch. Prop is full and free, set fully forward. Mixture, again full and free, we'll go to full rich for the time being. We'll reduce the mixture later on though, we're pretty high aerodrome elevation here. Master switch can come on. Circuit breakers are checked in, again we've just pulled the instrument circuit breaker there ourselves. Beacon can come on. Fuel pump, we'll use the prime pump for the start. It's obviously a pretty cold start, so we'll give that a good few seconds. There's our rise in fuel flow. And giving the prop area a good look out. Looks to be all clear, but we'll give everyone a shout. Clear prop! And we can engage the starter. Just feeding in some throttle, the engine a little bit reticent to catch there, not really surprising in these conditions. Now we have a good start. Oil pressure has come up, that's in the green. So we'll just reduce that mixture. And letting the engine idle at 1200 RPM. After start checks, RPM is set, brakes are holding, oil pressure checks, starter warning light is out. Ammeter is checked, suction looks good, magnetos are set to both. Flight instruments, so showing a heading there of about 242 on the HSI, and the same on the compass. Altimeters, we have QNH 1005 set on both altimeters and showing the correct aerodrome elevation there. Radios can come on. And obviously it's the TDS GTN Xi units that are the stars of the show today. We've got the 750 and the 650. Just cycle through the various menus. And we're primarily going to be using the GTN 750, at least initially. We'll just wait for the TORS test to complete.
TOS, system test OK.
And we'll clear our messages, just stating there of course that the unit is only suitable for flight simulation purposes. So first we'll build up the flight plan. We're departing out of Aspen, Kilo Alpha Sierra Echo, initially tracking out towards the red table VOR, which is Delta Bravo Lima. We've got two options there. Obviously we're looking for red table, that's 13 miles out to the north. After that we're going to be tracking on towards waypoint ICs, which is India Charlie, India Echo Sierra. Then on towards the Montrose VOR, which is Mike Tango Juliet. Then on towards Cones, which is Echo Tango Lima. And finally on towards Telluride, which is Kilo Tango Echo X-Ray.
6F119, advising you get field site.
We already know we're going to be landing on 09 given the current wind conditions over at Telluride. At least that's the most likely runway at the moment, so we'll load up the approach. And expecting we'll get the RNAV 09 Zulu. We don't want to activate that just yet, we'll just load for the time being. And lastly we'll just scroll through our flight plan, make sure everything's in there correctly. So we've got Aspen out towards red table, then on towards ICs, out towards the Montrose VOR, on towards the Cones VOR, and then finally into Telluride, and we have the RNAV 09 Zulu approach. So the flight plan's set up correctly. We'll come on to map on the GTN 650 for the time being. We'll just zoom in on there, we'll use that as an airport diagram. Later on we're going to be taxiing out to the south. We'll go for holding point Alpha 4 for an intersection departure off runway 33.
69 hour request standby.
We've already got the red table VOR tuned up, that's a frequency of 113.0. We have 113.0. And we've got the VLOC driving the HSI currently. Looks like we're already picking that up there on the HSI. And we'll just turn on our DME, showing 13 miles at the moment out towards the station. So the initial track out towards red table is going to be 346. We'll set that now on the HSI. That may change slightly based on our departure heading. We'll talk more about that in just a moment's time. Says 346. And coming now to charts. The TDS GTN Xi actually has an entire chart database for the United States, which is really nice, but just be aware, currently it's only the United States that is supported. There's no Navigraph support or anything like that just yet. The developers have said they would like to look into that, but currently at the moment no promises being made there. Anyway, we want departure charts. We're expecting the Aspen 7 departure. We'll go to full, and we'll just zoom in slightly on that so it's easier for you to see. We're going to be departing off runway 33, so it'll be a climbing right turn onto a heading of 348. We'll set that as well on the HSI.
Number 37 extra, continue taxi to runway 33 via Alpha.
That's 348. Climbing up to an altitude of 16,000 feet, or as assigned by air traffic. We'll go with 16,000, that will keep us clear of the terrain. And then expecting a further clearance thereafter. So we'll depart runway heading. We'll wait until we're through 500 feet before we make our turn onto a heading of 348. And you can see then tracking out towards the red table VOR. Anyway, that's the aircraft just about set up now for our departure. We're just going to sit here a little bit longer on the apron and I'll program the same flight plan into our GTN 650. We'll make our way down to the holding point and I'll come back to you again once we've carried out our run up and we're ready to go. Okay, so we are now down at holding point Alpha 4 for runway 33. We just finished our run up and our before takeoff checks. Air traffic's cleared us for the takeoff, so the park brake can come off. It's all clear on final, and all clear up wind. We'll get ourselves lined up on the runway. As usual in the sim, the runway is pretty heavily contaminated there, so it's a little bit tricky to make out the centerline markings. Just about see them. So we'll get ourselves lined up. We'll just stop momentarily on the runway just to check our compass heading and our HSI.
Number 12 Juliet, left turn off 4, join off contact ground 1 off.
And showing a heading there on the compass of 330, same on the HSI. So again, we're going to be climbing runway heading up to 500 feet. It'll then be a right turn onto a heading of 348. We've got that set up and we'll be tracking inbound towards the red table VOR. Feet off the brakes, coming up on the power. So power is set, RPM's checked, T's and P's look good. Coming back on the yoke. And we're airborne. Positive rate to climb, we'll tap the brakes, the gear can come up. And we'll pitch the aircraft, we'll trim for a climb speed of around 90 knots. Just wait until we're up through 300 feet before we retract the flaps. And there's 300 feet, so the flaps can come up. And I'll just wait until we're up through 500 before we make our turn out towards the north. So it's 500 feet, we'll start our turn, we'll come back to climb power, so 35 inches on the manifold pressure. And 2500 RPM.
Scouts 4794, runway 33, line up and wait.
And looking good now on our heading. And that's going to take us in towards the station. Showing 11 miles to run towards red table. Ground speed 102 knots, so we've got 6 minutes there. We'll just get the aircraft up through 10,000 feet and then we'll get the autopilot in. Now we'll just keep adjusting our throttle to maintain 35 inches manifold pressure. We'll keep reducing that mixture as well as we climb.
Scouts 4794, wind 1803, runway 33, clear for takeoff.
And once we've got the autopilot in, we'll just take a bit more of a look at the TDS GTN Xi functionality. For the time being though, we'll just focus on the flying. Absolutely beautiful morning here out of Aspen. Obviously we're very visual with the high terrain, but we'll take a look at the terrain display on the GTN 750 in just a moment's time.
XHF 119, contact departure 123.8.
So it's coming up through 10,000, the autopilot can go in. We'll just stay in heading for the time being. And we've got nav 1 selected for later on. Landing light can go off, as can the fuel boost pump. And just checking our temperatures and pressures, everything looking good there. Again, just coming up slightly on the throttle. And we'll just track slightly further out to the right here just to pick up the radial inbound towards red table. We're pretty much finished with our departure chart now, so we'll just come onto the map display here on the GTN 750. I'll just go onto terrain momentarily. So you can see we have a really nice terrain functionality, really good for situational awareness. We've got terrain at about 3 miles off the nose, you can see that pretty clearly, and then we've got another ridge we'll be crossing in about 5 miles time. That's the big ridge that's very clear and obvious off our 12 o'clock. Anyway, as we're visual with the terrain, we don't really need the terrain display for the time being. So we'll come back to map on the GTN 750. Just adjust our heading again to maintain the radial. And we'll go to flight plan on the 650. As we said, climbing up to 16,000 feet, so we've still got another 4,500 feet here in the climb.
Number 237, X-ray Aspen Tower, runway 33, line up and wait. Runway 33, November 237.
We'll stay on heading as we track inbound towards the VOR. It's going to be a pretty acute turn as we come over the station. And then after that we'll go into nav. We'll have the GTN 750 driving the HSI as we track outbound towards waypoint ICs. 6 miles to run now towards the red table VOR, 3 minutes. And we've still got 4,000 feet to gain here in the climb. So the unit is now telling us to turn on to heading of 215, so we'll oblige. And the aircraft just wanting to descend there as we make the turn, so coming back on the yoke. Of course, pitch control in the turbo arrow, entirely manual even with the autopilot in.
Thanks 43, I have an amendment for your routing advisory ready, copy.
There's one to go. We'll adjust our CDI onto a heading of 215. We'll stay in heading for the time being, but as I said, we'll set the CDI to now be driven by the GTN 750. And once we're established nicely in the cruise, we'll then switch over to nav on the autopilot. 500 feet to go.
Jet 551 after Blue Mesa, direct Alamos Alpha Lima Sierra, then asphalt, the rest is roadback, correct?
It looks like 16,000 is going to keep us just below the cloud base, so we should be fine there.
Jet 551 affirmative, keep is Kilo, Echo, Echo, Papa, Papa.
So there's 16,000, pitching the nose down. Get ourselves trimmed off for level flight. We'll leave the power in until we've built up some more speed. And in these sorts of conditions it seems to be a nice smooth day so far, so the autopilot shouldn't have too much trouble holding the altitude. There's 16,000, we'll get out, hold on, again just to free up our workload a little bit. As the speed builds up we can start reducing that rudder pressure. We'll just wait until we're up through 130 knots and then we'll come back on the power. So there's 130 for the cruise. We'll go for 30 inches manifold pressure and 2300 RPM. We're nicely lined up on the CDI bar now. Once again the GPS is driving it, so we'll go into nav. And we should now track inbound towards ICs with the GTN 750 providing our navigation to the autopilot. We'll centre up our heading bug. And lastly, now we're nicely established here in the cruise, we'll just lean out the engine.
Air 1 Golf Whiskey, traffic 2 mile final, 15 is the Pilatus. The traffic you're following is Pilatus 6 mile final. Okay, looking for 1 Golf Whiskey, have him on the box.
And as usual, we'll just go slightly rich at peak. So the engine is now leaned, cruising away over the mountains. Beautiful scenery as we depart out of Aspen. Sim looking really stunning. And 16,000 feet, just high enough really to keep us comfortably above it for the time being. Probably not a flight you'd really be wanting to do in a single engine aircraft, but for the time being the unit is only VC integrated into the Just Flight Arrow, although of course there are many other products that are planned for the future. Anyway, as usual, we'll head outside the aircraft, enjoy some of this scenery en route, and then we'll come back to the cockpit as we make our approach in towards Telluride. Again, the GTN 750, a really neat piece of kit when it comes to flying the approach, so we'll take a really good look at that as we fly in towards destination.
2285 with you, 13,200, spinning on the arrival, 210 on the speed.
SkyWest 5068, turn right heading up 325 to join finally, clear visual approach, runway 35 right.
Heading 325, clear visual approach 35 right, that's 58. South 1006 and 13,000, sending on a clash with Lima, hello.
Southwest 1006 and approach right here. Skywest 5181, turn 5 degrees to the right, vectors to final, maintain 10, 10,000.
5 right, 10,000, Skywest 5181.
5068, 170 knots or greater to France, contact tower 133.3.
170 greater to France, 33.3, Skywest 5068, get it?
Southwest 1006, turn 15 degrees to the right, vectors to final, descend and maintain 10,000.
Southwest 1006, 15 right, that's 275 heading, 10,000.
Roger.
2628, leveling 11,000, Lima.
At 2628, and approach, roger. 10,000, maintain VFR 10,500 or above.
So welcome back to the cockpit. Once again, absolutely stunning scenery here as we've made our way over the mountains inbound towards Telluride. Looking at our flight plan, we're showing we're going to be on the ground at time 30 and currently coming up on 18, so now would be a good time to start our descent. We'll come out of altitude hold and we'll just come back to around 25 inches on the manifold pressure. That should give us about 500 feet per minute rate of descent, which is what we want. We're currently up at 16,000 feet. And if we look at the waypoint info for Telluride, you can see that the aerodrome elevation around 9,000 feet. So we've got about 7,000 feet to lose currently. You can see as well that the GTN 750 actually superimposes the chart that we're going to be using onto the map. Again, a really nice feature, certainly helps with situational awareness. We'll talk more about that later on.
413, unable RNAV to effect vectors for the visual.
Just come slightly further back on the power there, the aircraft not descending very readily. We'll just come up on the mixture as well as we descend. For the time being though, we'll briefly approach off the chart. One feature that the GTN 750 from TDS is currently lacking, there's no ability to get either the real world weather or the Sims weather from the unit, which is a little bit of a shame. I have spoken to the developer and they've said they would potentially like to add that functionality at a later date, but currently they're limited with the Sims SDK in terms of bringing the sim weather into the unit. And in terms of bringing in the real world weather, it's a little bit tricky with the current Garmin software. So just using the sky vector weather for the time being. Obviously it's a pretty nice day here in Telluride. We've got more than 10 k's of visibility. A little bit of cloud coverage around 3,700 feet. It's around -10 again on the ground. QNH is the same, and light wind, so we're still good for runway 09 at the moment. Anyway, briefing the approach, it's the RNAV GPS Zulu approach for runway 09. Again, the aerodrome elevation 9,000 feet. We're coming in from the northeast, so we can descend down to 13,000, which is what we're doing currently. And the approach actually starts at 13,000, so we'll level off once we reach our altitude. We'll be coming in via the Cones VOR, which we've tuned up now on nav 1. And maintaining 13,000 until we hit waypoint Setma, then we'll start our descent. The TDS GTN will actually create a pseudo glide slope that we can fly down the approach, which again, a brilliant feature to have. We'll look at that more once the glide slope actually comes in, but first we'll have to arm up the approach. Anyway, my plan is to come overhead the VOR. As we make the turn, we'll come into heading briefly, we'll activate the approach, that will then have us tracking in directly to waypoint Setma. And then we'll go back into nav to fly the approach down towards the MDA. MDA for category A is 10,700 feet. We only need 1¼ statute miles for the approach. Again, we've got more than 10 k's viz, so we're good there. And if we do need to make a missed approach, it's a climbing right turn up to 15,000 feet, direct back to the Echo Tango Lima VOR for the hold. You can see there as well the aircraft symbology superimposed onto the chart. Again, a really nice feature, and it certainly helps again with that situational awareness. In terms of our terrain, we've got high terrain pretty much all around the field except for the approach path. Highest we can see there on the chart is 13,300 feet. MSA is 15,500, but we're good there as we're descending on the approach. We'll be landing on 09, vacating off to the left. The runway exit's actually fairly far down the runway, so we'll probably aim to land a little bit long. And again, in terms of our fuel, we've got absolutely plenty on board, plenty of decent options in the area, so if we do have to make a go around, the weather's nice enough that we'll make another approach into Telluride. Just come up through 15,000, so another 2,000 feet to lose here in the descent. Once again, the GTN 750's actually preempted the turn for us so that we don't overshoot the approach. And we've got a left turn to 098 coming up in 8 seconds, so we'll set that on the CDI.
10,000 till fuel left, clear for the visual, 35 left, yeah, 2360.
And we have 098 set. Again, we'll just come into heading momentarily. We'll fly the turn in heading. And once we're over cones, we can activate the approach. Just coming up on 1 to go. Our descent rate increasing quite a bit there as we make the turn, so we'll just come back on the yoke.
11,000 once there to Dental 210, commuter 4370.
Bronze spawn.
That was 1006, 160 to bronze.
And that's got us quite nicely established now inbound towards our planned track, so we'll come back to flight plan. And we can activate the approach, vectors to final. So Setma is now the active waypoint. We'll just keep a good eye on the CDI bar. Once we're back on course, we can go back into approach mode. You can see now as well we have our pseudo glide slope. That's only showing on OBS 1 at the moment. It will come up on the HSI later on. In most aircraft that would be a pretty powerful functionality to have. It would make flying the approach much easier. In the Just Flight Arrow though, we're going to have to of course fly the aircraft manually and pitch. So just coming back onto the CDI, we'll adjust the heading bug and we'll go into Loc on the autopilot.
Southwest 1006, connect tower 133, cushion 133.3.
33.3, good night.
6 miles westbound on final, 6,800 at Mount Control.
So the autopilot's going to fly us down what is essentially the pseudo localizer in this case. And we're just going to have to manually maintain pitch. Got 300 feet to go.
Emergency 09, turn to last heading 190, descend and maintain 90,000.
Once the aircraft's got itself settled down, we'll adjust the heading bug once again.
United 581, check in with your speed and contact approach 123.185.
2385, United 581, good day.
American 1313, contact approach 120.8.
120.8, American 13, so long.
And there's our 13,000, so we're going to out-hold. We'll only need that for a short period of time. The glide slope should be coming in fairly shortly. And again, we'll leave the power at 25 inches manifold pressure. We can take the gear below 130 knots. We'll just wait until the speed comes back to 120. Left onto 096 in 4 seconds, so we'll set that now on the CDI. There's 096. And we'll take the gear down. Looks like the glide slope just starting to come in there. We'll come up to 30 inches now on the manifold pressure to maintain the speed. And we do have 3 greens on the gear. So again, we'll come out of altitude hold. Ground speed's 140 knots, so we need a descent rate of around 700 feet per minute. That should have us maintaining the glide slope. And again, reducing the power now, making sure we don't pick up too much speed here with the gear down. The aircraft doing a very nice job of tracking the lateral path. And again, it's just us manually maintaining the vertical path for the time being. We'll keep the approach speed up for now. We'll hold the flaps a little bit longer. We've still got quite a few track miles to run inbound towards the airfield currently.
10-1 Golf Whiskey, the citation's just touching down now. Are you able to make a short approach here now?
Negative.
Roger.
And again, just reducing that manifold pressure to make sure we don't go through 130 knots.
Station 1 Foxtrot Whiskey, turn left Alpha 5, join Alpha contact ground point 9, good day.
Alpha 5, Alpha point 9, Dr. Henry, out 1 Fox Whiskey.
So with that chart superimposed on the map, we've actually got the chart and the map available at the same time, so it really enhances the aircraft in terms of being able to have a lot of information displayed all in one go.
Hey, ground 961 Fox Whiskey, Alpha 5, heading over to the terminal. 961 Foxtrot Whiskey, Aspen ground, taxi to Park to the Alpha, the Pilatus gives way to you.
Alpha, we'll see him on Fox Whiskey.
Just centering up our heading bug again, and looking good on the glide slope. Ground speed still around 140 knots at the moment.
Pro Flight 344, runway 33, taxi via Alpha and taxi Dr. Way past Alpha 6, please.
Okay, and T3 via Alpha and past Alpha 6, Pro Flight 344.
The unit also has an auto zoom function, so you can see it's constantly updating the zoom level there to give us the best possible picture of what we need to see on the screen. Okay, we'll start reducing our speed further now. We'll take some flap, we'll get the speed back to 100 knots. So we'll take a stage flap. Just coming up on our MDA, but of course we're already visual with the runway. And just feeding in some power now to maintain the speed. Ground speed now 110, so we need about 600 feet per minute rate of descent now to maintain the glide slope. Now we'll take another stage of flap.
Runway 15, clear to land.
Clear to land, runway 15, 835, yeah.
So 90 knots now on the speed, everything looking good. We'll just leave the autopilot in slightly longer. We'll leave it until we're down at 10,000 feet. We'll fly the last 1,000 feet manually.
So the ice pad is good, yeah, Pro Flight 344.
So heading hold can come off, autopilot master can come off. And we'll take full flaps. Pitch can go back to full fine. So pitch is full fine, undercarriage is down, flaps are set, landing clearance is not required. The runway is clear, looks like we've got 2 reds, 2 whites on the PAPI at the moment. Speed's back at 80 knots, so that's looking good.
500.
There's 500 feet. The approach into Telluride can be a little bit deceptive. There's actually a little bit of terrain just before the runway threshold, so it can end up looking like you're a little bit higher than you actually are. And again, we'll aim to land a little bit long here just to minimise our time on the runway.
Golf Whiskey, turn left to enable, join Alpha contact ground, point 9er.
Just getting a few light bumps as we come over the hills. A little bit of sink as well, that's just having us slightly low there on the PAPI, so correcting for that. So over the runway, again we'll just let the aircraft float slightly long, slowly cutting the power. And holding the aircraft off. There's touchdown. We'll leave the brakes for now, we'll let the aircraft roll through. It's actually a slight upslope here as well, so we'll actually come off on the power. Just to keep our speed up. And vacating off to the left.
If you want to go Whiskey Alpha 6 to the north ramp.
Number 31 Golf Whiskey, Aspen ground, taxi to parking the Alpha.
Yeah, 1 Golf Whiskey.
We'll just hold the after landing checklist till we're clear of the runway. You can see why I like flying into Telluride. The scenery, again, absolutely beautiful, and it makes for some really challenging approaches as well, particularly if the weather's quite marginal on the day. So off the runway, the flaps can come up. We'll set the transponder to standby. Landing light can come off, pitot heat can come off, the fuel pump can go off. Now we'll just make our way in towards the apron, we'll find somewhere to get the aircraft parked up. In terms of our aft landing checks, the flaps are up, trim is set neutral, throttle friction has been adjusted, fuel pump is off, electrics and radios are set, and the transponder is set to standby. That's the aft landing check is complete. We'll come around the back of this SimWorks Studios Quest Kodiak and we'll get the aircraft parked up. We'll definitely do another flight in that aircraft at some point sometime soon. So just making sure our wingtip is clearing its tail there, which we are. And we'll come around to park the other side of the Bonanza. So getting the nose wheel straight, bring the aircraft to a stop. Park brake can go on. We'll leave the throttle idling at 1200 RPM. And the shutdown checks, park brake is set. RPM, will leave the engine idling at 1200 RPM for 30 seconds. We'll carry out a mag check. And the mags are checked. We've had 30 seconds now, so the radios, again, will pull the circuit breaker. I'm not entirely sure whether or not that's necessary with modern avionics units. I think they're a little bit more robust in terms of electrical transients, but just to be safe, we pulled the instrument panel circuit breaker there, and the mixture can come back to idle cutoff. So we do have a good shutdown. Throttle can go to idle, mags can come off. Electrics, just making sure everything's off there except for the anti-collision light. Get the DME off. So the electrics are off. Master switch can come off. Anti-collision light can go off. We'll get the fuel selector off. And lastly, we can open up the cockpit door. So we'll let in some of that rather chilly mountain air. We'll get ourselves disembarked here on the ground in Telluride. Just to finish up the video, we'll briefly run through the various menus and subsystems of the TDS GTN that we didn't get to look at during the flight. So there you go guys, I hope you enjoyed our look at the TDS GTN Xi mod. As I said, we'll finish up the video just by scrolling through the various menus and subsystems that we didn't get a chance to look at during the flight. If we went through every single menu available in real time and I explained each feature along the way, we'd be here for quite some time. So we're just going to flick through in the background here as I discuss the product and my thoughts on it overall. As you'll have seen from our flight, TDS's GTN 750 and 650, a pretty capable piece of equipment. Very impressive what they've managed to achieve in the sim. The mapping is great, currently second to none, and again the ability to couple to the autopilot, a really nice functionality there. I think that opens up quite a few more possibilities in the sim. There are many airfields these days that are only served by GPS approaches. And realistically, if the weather's pretty marginal in the sim and you're stuck with the default GTN units, it's going to be a real struggle to accurately fly a typical GPS style approach. As we scroll through the menus here, you can see an awful lot of functionality has been modelled. Most of the major subsystems are there. Of course though, there are certain areas that haven't been modelled. Either I would imagine due to technical difficulties, of course the project is still ongoing as well, or due to the fact that these particular systems are just not relevant in the sim. I've had a little bit of time with the unit now and I can categorically say it's certainly enhanced my experience in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Just elevated the experience of flying the aircraft that little bit more. For the most part, the displays were very easy to read, they're very intuitive as well. Most of the functionality there is touchscreen in effect. Although I did find under a couple of lighting conditions the charts were a little bit tricky to read, a little bit oversaturated. And on the subject of charts, it's brilliant to have the US chart database included with the product. Unfortunately, at the moment, that is the only charting option available. There's no possibility, for example, to link up with the Navigraph account. I did have a discussion with the developer as to whether or not that might be included at a later date. The short answer for the time being is they would certainly like to include that functionality, but they're not going to be making any promises for the time being. So that is one area of the product that I would like to see improved. The only other one really was the weather functionality. As we discussed during the flight, unfortunately at the moment, the unit is not capable of actually bringing in any weather either from the sim or the real world. It's another feature that the developer would certainly like to add, but again, no promises made thus far. Really though, those are the only two features that I felt the unit was currently lacking, otherwise I thought it was really rather excellent. It's nice to finally have an avionics suite in the sim which, as far as I could tell from my experiences with it so far, doesn't have any of the usual Asobo quirks when it comes to implementation. I haven't tried anything particularly adventurous with it yet, but I've certainly flown a number of flights now from A to B with various departures and arrivals, making multiple en route changes as well, and so far I haven't had any peculiar behaviour, so that's really great to see. Obviously there's going to be a lot of comparison drawn between this and the PMS GTN 750. We're not going to touch on that too much today, we will actually be taking a look at the PMS version of the unit at a later date as well. As with most things flight simulation related, both products have their strengths, both products have their weaknesses. The TDS GTN 750 is considerably cheaper, and at least in terms of the mapping and the flight planning functionalities, it's every bit as good, if not considerably better than the PMS version. Currently, I would say it's a product that's well worth taking a look at if it's of interest to you. The lack of weather functionality is going to be something that affects everybody. As far as the charting goes, if you're predominantly a US flyer, then the TDS GTN Xi is going to be absolutely perfect for you. If however you like to fly in other parts of the world, then again just be cognizant that currently no other chart functionality is supported. Once again though, overall I really enjoyed the flight, I was certainly very impressed with the unit, and I'll definitely be looking to use it again in future videos. If you enjoyed our outing today as well, then please consider giving the video a like. If you've yet to do so and you want to see more content from the channel, then please consider subscribing as well. As ever, if you have any comments or questions for me, you can leave those down in the comments section below. A huge thank you once again to my channel members and patrons for all of your support, it's always thoroughly appreciated. I hope that all of you are having a great day wherever you are, take really good care, and I will see you all again soon.